Along with the set of logical operators that we reviewed in the previous lecture, there are a whole set of logical functions that work with logical operators. Logical functions evaluate one or more logical operators, or a Boolean, and then return a value. They can return any value. It does not have to be Boolean. That's kind of the point of using logical functions. We need functions to turn a Boolean value into something useful for the user. The first and most basic form of a logical function is the if function. Let's take a look at the if function and do a quick example. To the right of our table, let's type equals if, and then hit the insert function button next to our formula bar. In here, we can see that the if function takes in 3 arguments. The first is a logical test, which we either need to return true or false. Very often in Excel, we will be using a logical operator to make a comparison to then return true or false. The value of true is the value that the if function returns if the logical test returns true. Likewise, the value of false is the value returned if the logical test returns false. Okay, I'm going to X this out and give it a try. Here we have a list of students, their names, their ages, and their final project grades. Let's use if statements to put these students into buckets. In the year column, let's use an if statement to determine whether each student is in 11th grade or 12th grade. 16-year-olds are typically in 11th grade and 17-year-olds are in 12th grade. So we want our if statement to return 11th grade if the age is 16 and 12th grade if the age is 17. To use the if function in Excel, type equals if, and then open our parentheses, and we see the arguments. The first one is the logical test, and this is the test that we need to return true or false. For a logical test, let's first make a cell reference, and then say equals 17. Since we only have students that are either 16 or 17, we know that 17-year-old students are seniors in high school. Next, for our value of true, if a student is 17, they're in 12th grade. So we'll put a comma, and our value of true will be 12th grade. And if the student is not 17, that means they're in 11th grade. So value of false should be 11th grade. Make sure to close the quotes here and then press enter, and we see that Excel has properly categorized this student as being in the 12th grade. Since we know that this is working, let's use the fill handle to click and drag it down to the rest of our cells. Okay, let's move on to our pass or fail column here, where we want to say pass if a student gets a final project grade greater than 70, and fail if the final project grade is less than 70. Let's write our if statement, typing equals if, open parentheses, and our logical test is if the grade is greater than 70. If it's greater than 70, our value of true would be pass, and our value of false would be fail. Close the parentheses and hit enter, and it looks like Excel has properly categorized this student as passing. Let's once again use the fill handle to click and drag it down. For the blank cells, we can see that Excel is returning fail. That is because the blank cell is evaluated to have a value of 0, and 0 is less than 70 and therefore it fails. If you're ever unsure of what your logical test will return, a quick way to check is to go into your formula, highlight your logical test, and then press the F9 key. This shows you what your logical operator evaluates to. It's telling me that it evaluates to false. Before you go back and start editing your spreadsheet, make sure you use Ctrl-Z to return to the previous state. Hit enter. Once again, there are a number of final project grades that are blank here in row 5 and here in row 11. These students must not have turned in their project and should not be failed, but should be labeled as DNF for did not finish. This is where we can use a nested if statement to create a stronger and more complex logic. A nested if statement, sometimes called multiple if statements, is simply where you put an if statement inside of an if statement. To make a nested if statement, let's go into our top formula here. and delete our value if false. This is where we will put our nested if statement. Inside of our value if false, we can write another if statement, writing if and then opening parentheses. Then we can create a whole nother if statement inside of this if statement. We're going to check if the final project grade is blank by using the isBlank function. Opening our parentheses and then choosing this cell. If it is blank, then we want it to return DNF. Our value if false, which means that the student received a grade but did not get above a 70, is a fail. So we'll go ahead and write fail. Close our parentheses, and this looks good to me, so I'll go ahead and hit enter. Now let's try to copy and paste our formula down and see if it works. Now, for the blank cells, we see that Excel is properly returning DNF for the students that did not get a final project grade.